So the recent release of The Avengers at the cinema has prompted me to pick up and read one of the takes on the Avengers Marvel graphic novels called The Ultimates, which is written by Mark Millar. Now this is a guy who did Wanted and Kick-Ass. And The Ultimates is a series that has been sat on my shelf and that I haven't picked up until now. And having read it, I actually thought that this was interesting enough to warrant reviewing, because it is both a good action comic and also a terrible, completely wide of the mark take on the characters we've all grown to know and love. So the first set of comics is divided into two trade paperbacks, and that is The Ultimates Superhuman Volume 1 and The Ultimates Homeland Security Volume 2. The plot basically follows the formation of the Avengers, but they're now called the Ultimates. This is set in Marvel's Ultimate Universe, and there is an alien threat from a species called the Skrull, who are going to basically invade Earth, and the Ultimates have to save the day. That's the very basic plot, and what this comic tries to do but doesn't succeed is that Mark Millar is trying to make the Ultimates, the Avengers, relevant. He's trying to set the Avengers in a world that we can recognise as the reader, and a world that seems more relevant to us and to our own world. And in doing so, it's really that action that has completely misunderstood the characters and made them somewhat hateable. So now you have the creation of Giant Man, who is a member of the Ultimates, as it has no other reason to it than that the Ultimates want to sell action figures in order to fund the Avengers project. And also you have Betty Ross, the Hulk's love interest, playing the Ultimates PR representative, public relations representative, and she has to try and put a media spin on everything that they do. And I mean, there's one scene where the Hulk rampages through New York, killing hundreds of innocent people, and she has to try and devise a way to spin it to the media and play it off as an accident. And it's things like this. While they sound promising, they're not followed through, and they're not done particularly well. Some of the things that the characters say are just so out of character. Nick Fury actually refers to the Ultimates at one point as a bunch of gargling retards. Now, that to me isn't something that any character in the Marvel Universe should say. I actually found that quite offensive, and I think that Mark Millar needs to learn that using a word like retard in a comic book doesn't make that comic book edgy. And the way it's presented as well, when they say stuff like this in the books, is somewhat just mean-spirited and shallow, and it's there for no other reason than to have the teenage boys reading these books laugh. And it's like a remark that you'd hear on the playground. Now, while I'm not a prude at all, and it really, it does take a lot to offend me, I thought that such a transparent attempt at making the characters speak in modern terms really came off as just almost patronising and like I said, mean-spirited. I mean, Nick Fury, not only does he say that, but he's also a pop culture referencing, wisecracking soldier, mercenary, whatever you want to call it. And it just feels very laboured and wooden, and just like the dialogue just kind of slogs. Now, Nick Fury even makes reference to if he was played by an actor in a movie, it should be Samuel L. Jackson. And I just find remarks like this so distracting that they actually pulled me out of the book. Now, obviously, you can successfully write pop culture references into a comic book. I mean, Joss Whedon and Kevin Smith have done that with ease, and it's felt very organic and natural to the story that they're telling. In The Ultimates, Mark Millar is not a talented enough writer to pull that off. It is quite distracting, and he does have the sense of humour of about an 11-year-old boy. And while there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, when he's using terms like retard and they are being spouted by a character which young boys may look up to when reading these comics, I think he's playing quite a dangerous game. So that is the main problem with these books. Now, he does do stuff well, don't get me wrong. Mark Millar, he does action really well, and all the set pieces in the books feel very epic and grand in scale, almost like they should be shot in widescreen. Feels like quite relentless, breathtaking action. And he also, out of all the characters, the only character that he actually gets right is Captain America, who, after being thawed out, joins the Ultimates, but is very much a man out of time, and goes to visit his long lost friends and ex-lovers who are either dying, dead, or very, very old. And it's this stuff that really is where the book excels, and the character of Captain America is very well executed, and he does see, in terms of black and white especially, and this is another good subplot, where Giant Man is an abusive spouse to Wasp and actually beats her up, and Captain America wants to exact revenge on Giant Man. He sees the world in very black and white terms, as if he's still living in 1945, where a bunch of fives, or whatever you want to call it, would solve a problem. And I think that man out of time and abusive relationship, those two subplots that do end up colliding, are where the Ultimates is at its best, and it's very, very well executed. But it's the treatment of the other characters, and I mean, stuff like Betty Ross being a shameless PR representative, Tony Stark being more interested in lucrative merchandising contracts than actually saving the world, and Nick Fury awkwardly and clunkily referencing pop culture and Samuel Jackson, etc. You've also got Thor, who is a hippie who says he will only join the Ultimates if the American government doubles the aid budget, and it just comes across as so laboured and unnatural that it's quite difficult to read at times. But luckily the stuff with Giant Man and Wasp, and also Captain America, that stuff is so good that it's worth reading the rest of it to see where it goes. Now, the final confrontation with the Skrull, who have apparently, and this is a minor spoiler for anybody who's not read it, who have apparently, some of them were disguised as Nazis during the Holocaust, and it kind of, while that's a really good idea, and I enjoy books that use Nazis as villains because they are the universal villain, and very classically so, it almost downplays some of the Holocaust, which obviously is one of the greatest acts of evil in human history, and it almost downplays it and tries to weave in this alien invasion storyline into it. And while it's probably a better idea on paper, when you actually see the panels and you read in the story, again, that wasn't very well executed. That also felt quite clunky and quite like it didn't quite slot together, which was unfortunate because that had a lot of potential to be quite an interesting villainous storyline. So while it sounds like I haven't been very complimentary of the Ultimates, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the Giant Man and Wasp stuff, I enjoyed the Captain America stuff, and the action was very well executed. The hyper-real artwork by Brian Hitch is very good. I mean, you look at this cover, it's very, very well drawn. It's just Mark Millar's writing is too almost mean-spirited and juvenile for these characters, which are characters that young boys and girls will look up to, as I did when I was young. And seeing the characters that I loved growing up speak like this is not right, to be honest. And as I say, I don't get offended easily, but I honestly feel like Mark Millar, in trying to update the Avengers for a modern audience, has completely missed the point at what made the characters lovable and likeable in the first place. I would recommend it because it is an interesting book and it does have its interesting subplots. However, it does miss the mark on quite a lot.